I would like to say, for those of you who don't know me, I'm John Hegarty. I'm Provost of Trinity College. And on behalf of Hugh Brady, President of UCD, and myself, I'm delighted to welcome a visit by the Irish Technology Leaders Group, commonly known as ITLG, here to Dublin and to the UCD TCD Innovation Academy. The ITLG group is based in Silicon Valley. Is a very unique development and a very important development for this country, especially since we're all very conscious of the environment we're heading into. I think it may not be that different in California, probably not as bad as here. And it is unique in the sense that the ITLG is made up of the new breed of Irish Americans, the entrepreneurs, the innovators, many of them Irish, some Irish American who are great friends to this country.
We're delighted to be here. I think when I initially started talking with David Lloyd and Des Fitzgerald about the Innovation Academy, one of the big challenges from an Irish perspective from David and Des was, how do we engage with Silicon Valley? How do we get mentorship of people who have experienced and taken companies from a university or a seed stage to become multi-billion-dollar companies? I have an Irish accent, but I spent my entire career working with US companies. I've lived in Silicon Valley for the last 12 years, and I've experienced the Silicon Valley taste of innovation, the positive attitude that's there, the go-for-it type experience. So I was delighted to be able to bring these three gentlemen here today, along with a delegation of 25 executives from Silicon Valley who are actually in Limerick, at University Limerick, for our event, which will actually take place on Wednesday. Let me introduce you to the three speakers in order. Ed Colligan. Ed and I go back about 10 years. We worked with each other at both Palm and Handspring. And Ed was the original founder of Handspring. He was the original team as part of the Palm team. Once upon a time, you heard of the Palm Pilot. That was the big iPhone, about, well, I was going to say a decade ago, but it's certainly in the early 90s. But Palm and Handspring really led the way in the whole area of the smartphone and the mobile computing space. And during that time and going through that, we literally went from a company from zero to about a $1.6 billion company. And Ed was really the driving force and the CEO that made this happen. I felt it would be really good for you to hear from Ed. The next gentleman is John O'Ryan. I believe John is probably the most successful technology leader that has ever come from Ireland. John left Ireland in 1974. He worked at RTE as an engineer, and in 1974, with his family, came to California. John founded a company called Macrovision, and he'll share with you that story. That is now today a company called Rovi. It's a NASDAQ-quoted company, and it's now a $5.6 billion company. I don't know if there's many Irish companies that are $5.6 billion companies, but a guy that has gone from California to create that, I think, would be a very great asset to young students and young aspiring entrepreneurs. And then finally, but certainly not least, Craig Barrett has been a very familiar face around the world, but certainly in Ireland. Intel came to Ireland over 20 years ago, and the coming of Intel to Ireland was really the start of what we know as the Celtic Tiger, and it was very much a watershed moment. Intel have invested $7.1 billion over the course of those years, probably one of the biggest investments in this country, and employing over 5,000 people in Leakslip and almost 300 people working in R&D down in Shannon. Under Craig's leadership, that decision was made, And Craig last year retired from chair of Intel, and he participated at the Family event, which some of you may have heard and seen, and he made some very telling points about the future of Ireland and where we need to get in the game and where we need to focus and invest our efforts and our energies.
Handspring's an interesting story, the Trio story, because when we originally founded Handspring, we were just doing clones of the Palm Pilot. We had left Palm and we wanted to start a new company, and so we said, okay, we'll just make another handheld computer. And we did that, and it became a very successful business. We actually took about 25% of the handheld computing market pretty much overnight with a product called the Visor, which was a little handheld computer, allowed you to add little peripherals into it, and that was its unique design premise. The interesting thing, though, is we decided we didn't want to be second. Palm was the leading handheld computer maker, and we saw the future of being wireless. And so we decided that we were going to go make the smartphone. Now, no one had ever made a smartphone at that time, and the concept wasn't even called a smartphone then, and the wireless networks were in their infancy. But we decided that we wanted to take a leadership position. We didn't want to be the second best handheld computing company. We wanted to be the best smartphone company. We wanted to be a leader in that space. And so we literally went from about a $500 million handheld computing company to a $50 million handheld computing company because we decided to put all our investments into the smartphone business. And so that hurt our handheld computing business, and during that time it really started to undermine the whole business. But in the end, it ended up being a big, big bet that worked out. We ended up creating the Trio, which became a huge hit as a smartphone, and it turned Handspring into another success story that it hadn't necessarily or wouldn't necessarily have been if we had just continued down the same path we'd been on. So again, real reinvention and really a drive for leadership, I think, is important, and going after things that you really want to make happen. Finally, recently, about 3 years ago, we ended up merging Handspring and Palm back together again. And in that process, I created a new company. It was just called Palm again, but where we were selling the Trios and the handheld computers. Unfortunately, during all the corporate ins and outs of Palm, they had ended up, at one point in time, spinning out, when we were at Handspring, the Palm management team ended up spinning out their operating system to another company and creating another company called Palm Source, which ended up being bought by another company. And so we'd lost control over some of the core technology, the intellectual property, and all the underlying architecture of the Palm Pilot and the Trios and everything else. We had no real ability to continue to develop on that platform. So we made the very bold move of literally taking the company private and deciding to reinvent the entire operating system. And in this time, we decided that we were not only going to reinvent it, but we were going to decide to not tie it to the desktop anymore. We were going to tie it to the cloud and really go to the web as our basis for information for the next generation of devices. And we spent about 2.5 years reinventing Palm, creating a whole new architecture called the Web OS, and an entire new product line, which is became the Palm Pre and the Palm Pixie, and the products that eventually convinced HP to buy the company for $1.5 billion recently. So that was a major transformation. The company was on its kind of deathbed, and we ended up really going and transforming the whole thing again and creating another new company. Obviously there's a theme here, which is you can't, it doesn't always happen the way you think it's going to happen. You have to be persistent and stay the course. You got to be willing to make changes when tough times hit you in the face. And really willing to push the envelope. And so as you're thinking about starting new companies or innovating in areas, there's a few key themes that I would put forward. One is don't be afraid to make big bets. I mean, you're going to be working on something. It might as well be something that ultimately can be really big and really successful. And so you gotta be willing to go for it. I think that's really important. I always like to say conservative plans and bold actions, which is you want to plan to stay in the game as long as possible, but at some point you've got to go for it, and there will be opportunities and there will be openings to do that, and so going after it when you have that opportunity is really important. I like to under-promise and over-deliver. It's something that too few businesses and governments and politicians and anybody does today, but it's something that I think has served me well over the years. Obviously, do a business that you're truly incredibly passionate about. I think I've shown you that flexibility is key. No 5-year plans that can't be changed. You got to really roll with the punches. And then the last thing, or one of the last things, is being very, very focused. I see more innovation, more startup companies with plans that there's no way they will ever be able to execute. You got to really hone down to the things that you think are really, really, really important. Do those things first, then move to the next thing. And I tend to see a lot of people try to do too many things at once and then end up failing at the core thing they should have done. And I guess in the end, it's you can never rest on your laurels. We had to work incredibly hard to make all those things happen, and hard work still pays. There's no question about that. So no matter if you have all the funding in the world and all the support in the world and everything else, you still got to roll up the sleeves and make it happen. So that's my story, and hopefully gives you a little sense of the kind of dynamism and the creativity that's going on in Silicon Valley constantly, and the kind of message that we are trying to bring to Ireland to encourage people, to get people excited about the fact that it is possible to do the kind of things that they want to do as startup companies. And that's what we're doing over the next couple of days, is meeting with a lot of those companies to help hopefully energize them and help them fulfill their possibilities that they're looking for.
I moved to California in 1974 to pursue a career in electronics. And by 1980, I was managing a team of engineers at Ampex Corporation, then one of the leading innovating companies in Silicon Valley. Ampex was the company that developed audio and video tape recording. It was a fabulous company to work for as an electronics engineer, and I learned a great deal there. And while I was there, I was granted some 16 US patents in various fields having to do with television camera design. But it was not until I left Ampex to start my own company that I got a real feel for the life and death role that patents can play in a company's growth and its survival. So in the time-honored tradition of Silicon Valley, I left Ampex in 1983 to found my own company, which I named Macrovision Corporation. My co-founder was a local businessman and with a background in accounting and financial management. He committed a year's seed capital to the venture, and the basic deal we had was that I had 1 year to figure out, to invent something that could become the basis of a profitable and worthwhile business. And if at the end of that year I hadn't succeeded in doing that, then we would shake hands and go our different ways. So there was somewhat considerable pressure on me to make something happen. But a few months into the program, we had considered and rejected many possibilities for a business enterprise. We learned about an extremely important lawsuit that was wending its way through the US courts. It came to be known as the Betamax case when it finally reached the Supreme Court. It was a suit filed by Universal Pictures with an amicus brief from Disney against Sony Corporation, claiming that the existence and sale of video cassette recorders, at the time Betamax recorder, contributed to the infringement of studios' copyrights and should be either banned or there should be some levies placed upon them. When we read about that, we decided that we would seek a technological solution to the problem, so I began to devote my full efforts to see if I could come up with something there. In a nutshell, the problem was how to modify a video signal so that the modified signal could play perfectly on all existing TV sets, but at the same time could not be copied on existing VCRs. And at the time, there were probably 40 million video cassette recorders in various homes in America. And it was a major problem for the Hollywood studios. They were deeply concerned about it, and hence they were seeking legislative solutions. So after a few months of working the problem, I found two approaches that looked like they could give rise to a solution. And they were based upon my discovery of two subtle differences in the way in which VCRs and TV sets respond to video signals. And then finding a way to exploit that difference was, of course, the key to building a successful copy protection product. You can see from all of this that this is a very uncool technology to compare to the stuff that Ed has done. But uncool or not, it gave rise to a good business. So in the course of developing this stuff, two unavoidable problems that bear on intellectual property became obvious to us. The first was, as soon as we released the technology into the marketplace, it would be possible for a skilled engineer, not even a very skilled engineer, to take a look at the video leaving a VCR and deduce exactly what we had done to make that video uncopyable. And it would also be obvious that they could replicate the device that does the copy protection for about $100 or $200, and therefore it was clear that unless we got strong patents, we were going to be out of business fairly shortly. Because even though you may invent something, you don't own it until you patent it. It's anybody's to take if you don't patent it. And the second problem was even more concerning to us, and that was that as soon as the technology would be introduced into the market, people would build black boxes, devices designed to remove the signal from a copy-protected video and thus allow it to be copied again. And this was an even more serious problem because it would be obvious that the Hollywood studios might well pay us to copy protect their videos, but as soon as it became clear that there were many black boxes out there available for $100 or $200 that could undo it all, then our value proposition would disappear overnight and we'd be out of business. In fact, several companies did come out there and they had products called macro busters and macro eliminators and so on and so forth. But here's what we did to counter that in advance. We filed for patent protection on every way I could think of to defeat our own copy protection technology. And throughout the years of pursuing the business, we would, as soon as a new black box would come on the market, we would file suit in federal court, patent suit in federal court against the perpetrators, and we usually got them out of business within a matter of months. Most business executives would readily agree that obtaining patent protection for their company's technology is necessary to prevent others from absconding with the fruits of their R&D efforts. But I see it in a far more strategic light than that. Consider the business of consumer electronics. For less than $50, you can buy a DVD player, a really good quality DVD player today that will work fine for many, many years, give you excellent picture quality. And few people realize how incredibly complex these machines are inside. They may not look great when you crack them open, but the chips in there, many of them made by Intel, are amazingly complex machines that took many, many thousands of man-years to develop. And yet they sell for $50. And the reason for the low selling price is intense competition. Technology companies, you undoubtedly will know, they strive for market dominance by designing better products than their competitors, reducing manufacturing costs to a minimum, engaging in superior selling strategies, and building great brand names. And all of this takes great effort and ingenuity, and is something that's very difficult for a startup company to do. But my view is that an enlightened patent strategy can actually enable a company to get paid a price for its products that fairly reflects the value given to the customer, rather than an artificial price determined solely by competitive marketplace dynamics. And this has become an article of faith for me in the growth of Macrovision. We always focused on products in which we could get a really strong patent position, a lock-in patent position, and didn't have to deal with competition. It's a very nice way to do it if you can. By the way, just in case the recounting of the growth and success of my company has given you the illusion that it was a textbook decision-making and execution process, let me assure you that I made so many bad mistakes and screw-ups and bad decisions throughout the course of the developing of that company that I have thankfully forgotten all about most of them. But, you know, you just have to learn from them. So in closing, I would say a lot of you guys here undoubtedly would like to start your own companies, and there's no reason in the world why you can't go and do it.
Well, good morning. I'd like to raise the level of the discussion to perhaps a higher plane and talk not so much at the entrepreneur's level, but more at the company or country level in terms of competitiveness going forward. I think it's pretty clear that Ireland has proven conclusively, following the United States' footsteps, that unbridled investment in real estate is not a long-term economic plan for any country. There has to be some other way to drive economic growth. And I think the only alternative solution is really that which involves innovation and creating wealth from the bottoms up. And that program really requires three fundamental things. It requires smart people, that is a good education system. It requires smart ideas, and that really is the investment in research and development. And then it requires the right environment where you put smart people together with smart ideas and do something. And that is really the innovative or entrepreneurial structure of society. And that's it. Right environment includes all sorts of things: societal attitude towards failure, presence of venture capital, tax laws, rules and regulations for starting companies, all of the incidentals involved in trying to become an entrepreneur. So if you look at that as the alternative to real estate investment or even the abundant natural resources, it is not surprising that the conversation that we're having here today is actually going on in many, many different countries, many different cities, almost as we speak here. You could go to Russia and you could see that Russia is trying to recreate Silicon Valley outside of Moscow in a so-called Skolkovo implementation. You could go to Singapore and see what they are doing. You could go to any of numerous Chinese universities and see innovation institutes very similar to the Innovation Academy between these two fine universities here in Dublin. You could go to Korea. You could come to my home state in the United States, Arizona, where we have Science Foundation Arizona, which was a direct copy after Science Foundation Ireland. In fact, we hired Bill Harris when he left Ireland and SFI to come to Science Foundation Arizona, which was, in fact, SFI was a direct copy of the National Science Foundation in Washington, D.C. So there's not much secret to any of this. It's really the hard work and the implementation that goes forward. What I wanted to say this morning, a couple of just, I think, simple, straightforward facts. One is the concept of research and development to a country is increasingly important. If you look at what developed countries like Ireland, like the United States, Western Europe, Japan, what we're facing in the way of competition is, in fact, that we like our high standard of living, we like wealth creation, we like good high-paying jobs, we like a growing economy. And the only way you can do that is by constant creation of new companies and new wealth, new products, new ideas within your country. That requires a continuing stream of investment. And that investment in new ideas really comes in two parts: public sector and private sector. The public sector, for historic reasons, invests in basic research. That basic research usually takes place at research institutes or universities like Dublin or Trinity or Shannon or Limerick or Stanford or MIT, those sort of institutions. There's also a private sector involved in the R&D case, but typically private sector R&D is more development than basic research, and it's more the extension of existing ideas. You can, for example, look at a company like Intel that invests $6 or $7 billion a year in research, but it's mostly development. This is next generation microprocessor. It's going into optical photonics. It's some extension of the current Intel business line. A company like Microsoft as well will invest $8 billion a year in basic research, or excuse me, not basic research, but development, extension of existing product lines, whether it's the operating system, the application suite, and maybe some of the other programs that Microsoft has in terms of their Play or Xbox or some other new product line. The interesting thing about major corporations' research budgets is they're not particularly entrepreneurial in their nature. They are typically extension of existing product lines. You can see that very simply from a Microsoft case. What are the challenges that Microsoft has seen to their basic product line over the last decade or so? Have those challenges to Microsoft come from other major corporations with equivalently large research budgets, or have they come from another source? And if you look at this, you see very quickly the three major challenges to Microsoft over the last decade or so have been university research projects with one or two researchers. There's the internet browser that came from the University of Illinois, really a supercomputer laboratory at the University of Illinois with Mark Andreessen and formed a company called Netscape. It was the first major challenge to Microsoft. Second major challenge to Microsoft was something called the Internet Directory. A couple of graduate students at Stanford University formed Yahoo. The third challenge to Microsoft was, in fact, something called the search engine, Google, and that, again, a couple of graduate students from Stanford University. So you have to ask yourself this interesting question, which, how can two graduate students with a research budget of $50,000 or $100,000 challenge a major corporation with a research budget of $7 billion? And the only conclusion you can arrive at is that the idea, the individual idea, is immensely powerful and immensely valuable. And the ideas come quite often from basic research out of universities. And those research projects within universities can challenge even the most major corporations with the largest research budgets in the world. There's actually another aspect of corporations and their research, because they have existing product lines and they have something called a chief financial officer who looks for return on investment. Anytime you bring a new idea to a chief financial officer in a major corporation, the chief financial officer says, well, how will you monetize that? What is my return on investment? Can you show me that I should invest my money here rather than extending my microprocessor line, my operating system, my existing product line? And of course, if you looked at the three suggestions that I just gave you, the internet browser, the internet directory, and the internet search engine, when those technologies were created, those ideas were imagined, there was no idea how to monetize the idea in the commercial marketplace. And you can imagine when you take an idea like that to the chief financial officer of a major corporation saying, I have a great idea, but I have no idea how to make money out of it, what the answer is. The answer is forget your great idea and go back to work and make money for the corporation. So there's a huge role here on basic research in the research universities to move forward, to bring new ideas to the marketplace, to feed the entrepreneurs of society, and to create wealth, create jobs. And frankly, that's the only way that Ireland or the United States or Japan or the Western European, the established economies of the world, will compete in the future. You have to have those smart people and those smart ideas. Now, the question then is, all right, what are the fundamentals, what are the basic principles of this new economy? Let's forget real estate development. Let's talk about real wealth creation and how do we do that. First of all, you have to imagine that you have substantial investment in these new ideas. And so what is substantial? What is the metric that you measure R&D in countries by? Well, you look at typically at the gross domestic product, gross national product of a country, and you say some reasonable fraction of your gross national product should be reinvested in new ideas. And that should be both the public and private sector together. If you look at the Lisbon Agenda, which is 10 years old or so now, it coined the metric that European countries should invest roughly 3% of gross national product in R&D. Interestingly, the Lisbon Agenda took place before the world really changed and before India and China and Latin America and Eastern Europe and Russia became part of the world's free economic system. I would have guessed that 3% was a good number 10 years ago, but probably is not a very good number today, and probably something like 5% of the gross national product of a developed economy should be reinvested into R&D each year. Ireland is a bit off of 5%. The United States is a bit off of 5%, which is why there's a lot of discussion in each country, as well as other countries, about how do you increase your investment in research and development. How do you get to that 3, 4, or 5% number? The second principle is that not only do you have to have a substantial investment, it has to be a sustainable investment. And when you talk about sustaining investment in difficult times, you get into more of a political issue than a simple economic issue. And the political issue that Ireland faces, that the United States is facing in parallel with you right now, is in fact, how do you sustain a substantial investment in an area where the return on investment is substantially longer, or occurs over a substantially longer period of time than the current election cycle for your next government? And this is what politicians are continually faced with, which is how do you support a substantial investment over a sustainable period of time when it's likely that my government or my term in office will not see benefit for this before the next election cycle. And this is why you see it's such a difficult issue for politicians to face the challenge of, I must make this investment, it's good for the long-term future of the country, but it's not to the benefit of my next election cycle. A bridge, a road, a building is something substantial I can look at within a 1 or 2 year period. I want to just finish up very quickly with an observation by one of the founders of Intel, Gordon Moore, and probably everybody here has heard of Moore's Law, which says in the electronics area everything doubles every 18 months or so, memory density, compute power, transistors, and an integrated circuit. But Gordon also has another law which is less often quoted, but I think is absolutely germane to Ireland today, to the United States today, to major corporations today as we exist in a period which is of some financial uncertainty. And Gordon made the comment one day that, in fact, technology does not recognize recessions. Technology continues to move forward at almost an ever-increasing rate. And so if you're a corporation involved in the technology area, your only option to stay abreast with technology and to stay in a competitive position is not to slow down your investment in technology at any time. And if you get into a period of recessionary characteristics, difficult financial time, Gordon claimed that the only way to get out of a recession in a stronger fashion than when you entered the recession is to invest your way out and not to save your way out. And in fact, if you look at what I'd consider to be the premier corporations of the world, even in difficult financial times, they don't cut their R&D budgets. They don't skimp on investing in the future. They, in fact, invest their way out of recessions rather than trying to save their way out of recessions. This is absolutely contrary to every advice you'd get from an investment banker or from the press or from anyone from Wall Street who deals with stocks and what you should do as a CEO in a difficult time. They will always say, have a layoff, cut back in your expenses. Don't you know it's a recession? This is what you're supposed to do classically in a recession. But in fact, I think quite to the contrary, those companies, and expanding that for a moment to those countries that invest their way out of recessions end up on the other side of the recession in a much stronger position. I mention this with a little bit of experience. While I was at Intel for 35 years, we had 10 or 11 recessions. The electronics industry has been fairly cyclical over that period of time. And in every one of those 10 or 11 recessions, those companies that continued to invest heavily during the recessionary period always came out on the other side stronger and ahead of their competition than those that chose to save their way out. So my bit of advice, perhaps not to you, but to your political leaders as they're coming up with your budget on December 7th is don't try to save your way out of this recession from an investment standpoint, an investment in basic research and development. Invest your way out of this recession. Thank you.